I'm Sadie Schaecher, and I've been in recovery for about 3 years now. During this time, I've had to become much more attuned to the potential triggers in the world around me. Keeping myself in the best space for my treatment meant understanding what in my surroundings could affect my mental health. Little did I know that by doing this, I was about to open one monster can of worms for myself. Because it turns out, when you turn on that sensor in your brain to start identifying the detrimental ideas in society, it goes off a lot at the beginning. What's important to remember here is that we don't have to process all of this at one time. Learning to identify these ideas and work against them takes time, and that's perfectly okay. Let's start with something that I think some of us might have some experience with. Now, I don't mean to call out any major boy bands here. It's purely coincidental, but that being said, how many of us have heard the idea, maybe in the music or maybe that one love interest in a novel, that a person is beautiful because they don't know that they are? I definitely have. Awesome, we got some people? Yeah. When I was young, before all the toxic ideas in the media had a chance to take hold, I used to be able to put on a tutu because yes, I was a tutu kind of kid, and yes, I love that about young me, and look in the mirror and think, wow, I look so pretty. And then I grew up and started tapping into these parts of society and realized, oh, I'm not supposed to think of myself as pretty. That it was better for me not to believe in my own beauty, my own potential, because of how others might view me. It took me a long time to be able to look in the mirror and compliment rather than insult myself, like I did when I was a kid. However, identifying these ideas doesn't have to be such a prolonged and difficult effort. Most of us have already begun doing so in our daily lives, simply in areas that are more widely acknowledged, one of which being the representation of natural bodies in the media. A YouGov study shows that 76% of people believe the media promotes an unattainable body image for women, and 52% believe it does the same for men. So this isn't a completely newfound process for a lot of us. It's more of a matter of implementing it into our daily lives, as we can't always dictate what the media is dealing us. However, we can learn how to mindfully designate what enters our headspace, absorbing only what will positively affect our mental health. Now, to get more familiar with this, let's look at a slightly more complex idea. This next one I identified mainly through music at the beginning, but it expands far beyond that, especially in today's youth. So for this one, I'm going to ask for a little bit of help from you guys. Don't worry, all you have to do is I'm going to name some musical artists, and when you hear one that you recognize, all you have to do is raise your hand and keep it raised, okay? So let's go through some. Chance the Rapper. We already got a lot of hands raised. Awesome. Dove Cameron. Leah Kate, Lemon Demon, Girl in Red, Sarah Bareilles, Tessa Violet, and if your hand isn't already raised, Ariana Grande. Now, let's look around the room and see how many hands are raised. That's a lot, right? Okay, thank you. Now, what do all of these popular artists have in common? They all have a song not only about, but titled bad ideas. There are so many of these because the media fully embraces and romanticizes them. As there's an idea that's been developing now for a while in youth culture, that ideas we can classify as bad are actually exciting and empowering. It's a similar concept to roller coasters, really. As when you think about it, a cart that goes really high up in the air and then crashes back down at increasingly fast speeds doesn't really sound that enticing. However, it's not the actual thing that makes it so successful, but the thrill that it gives us. The media has populated bad ideas as having the same thrill effect, making unsafe and injudicious ideas seem worthwhile. I remember the first time that I ever engaged in an ineffective coping mechanism, and it gave me that same feeling. Knowing that it wasn't a good idea drove me, because knowing that it was a bad idea made me feel powerful, not because doing so was giving me any more power over the strong emotions I was feeling, but because the media had taught me that this was the only way to really feel something, to give me a thrill that would overcome the negative emotions that I felt overwhelmed by. This is the basis behind all ineffective coping mechanisms. They are used for their short-term effects, which provide a rush of dopamine, but are often not productive to long-term emotional and physical well-being. When the media adds in these reckless notions as being a thrill ride, instead of short-term coping mechanisms, it ends up in often dangerous scenarios. Now, this kind of identification is all about practice. So I'm going to give up another idea. And I know you guys are probably thinking, she has another one? I know, we already got the free food. What are we still doing here? All right, how many of us laughed or smiled at that? It's okay, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands for this one. Just keep it in mind as I ask this. Did we respond that way because it was genuinely funny, or because we felt like we should, even though it was a comment I negatively aimed at myself? Because that's what this is all about, right? An idea gets popularized, forced onto us, and therefore we feel like we should play into it, whether or not it's productive to a good mental state in ourselves and in others. And that is how society gets us in this position. An idea gets popularized, and therefore we feel like we should play into it, and that is how this society gets us in this position. Seemingly harmless messages, simple things really, get built up in this snowballing effect. And it's up to us to break that cycle for ourselves. The media won't stop feeding us these messages until we stop subscribing to them. Growing up, I never had the person to teach me these things, to tell me that my mind was important, and tell me how to treat it with the kindness it deserved in this modern, media-driven world. Let me be that for you. Because if I could go back to that little girl in a tutu and tell her one thing, I'd say to hold that part of herself most dear, to never let the world cause her to lose that light. She might not be able to hear me right now, but you can. Thank you.